Hey, curious people. You're listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast, where we explore our fascinating internal sexual landscapes and discover our authentic sexual selves. I'm your host, Patricia Rich, a certified internal family systems and sex therapist, coach, and creator of the self-led sexuality model for healing, pleasure, and empowerment. I've spent the last 30 years helping people to develop fulfilling relationships with themselves and others. If you're ready for some warm, smart, and juicy conversations, me and my parts invite you and your parts to get cozy and settle in. In today's episode, I talk with Deran Young, a licensed therapist, co-author of New York Times bestseller, You Are Your Best Thing, retired military officer, and the founder of Black Therapists Rock, a nonprofit organization that mobilizes over 30,000 mental health professionals committed to reducing the psychological impact of systemic oppression and intergenerational trauma. Deran has visited over 37 different countries and become a leading influencer and public figure committed to spreading mental health awareness and improving health equity. She resides in the Washington, D.C. area and continues to explore the world with her young son. In today's conversation, Deran sheds light on collective legacy burdens and developmental needs, especially those that impact Black women's sexuality. I especially appreciate Deran's vulnerability in sharing her own life story and doing a piece of live IFS work with a self-reliant part and a part that craves more touch in her daily life. Please join us for this potent conversation. Deran, I am so honored to have you as a guest on the Self-Led in Bed podcast. And just wanted to check in and see if you're noticing, any parts that are here as we open this conversation.
Yeah, I really have an excited part that's been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and a part that's just being aware of the privilege and the amount of healing that I've done to be able to have this kind of conversation as a Black woman with my lived experiences, and being willing to be vulnerable and share that with others is a gift. Yeah.
I am really taking that in and really appreciate starting there. And it, I'm hoping perhaps you could share a little bit with us about your understanding of all of the barriers, that can exist as a Black woman in particular, or as a BIPOC person when it comes to trying to get to a place of accessing a healthy relationship with sexuality.
Yeah, well, I guess I would have to start by saying I didn't know that it was a possibility. Sex is not something that I grew up hearing talked about much. And when I did, it was very much in a negative way. I grew up in the church in the South, and it was very much the take home message was that I needed to wait until I was married to have sex. And that was actually a real goal that I had for myself. And people find that surprising when I'm having conversations with people who did not grow up in that kind of environment. They're like, oh, that was a real thing. You thought you were going to be married when you had sex for the first time. And I'm like, yeah, that's the take home message when you grew up in the church, in the Black church, especially in the South. So I feel like religion is one of those things that it's useful at a point in time, when you need hope and you need some source of encouragement and something larger than yourself, having a higher power is something that I think is really great in terms of our healing journey. However, when that higher power is a dictator and punishing, and for some of the more natural things about our bodies, it can really be confusing about, why do I have this desire to begin with if it's such a bad thing? If I'm going to go to hell for using it, why do I have it? And so when I was in Africa, I learned a lot about. So I spent some years in Africa during grad school as part of an internship, if you will, or study abroad program. and I was asked to teach social studies. But what I was really doing is learning social studies while so that I could teach something. And one of the things I learned about that was really disturbing actually was female genital mutilation, and how, because of beliefs or legacy burdens around women's bodies and the need to control women's bodies, um, for the good of society, that there's some really horrible things that women have been through around the world, not just in Africa, not just, in India and places like that, but even right here in America, our own legacy burdens around, women bodies, and especially Black women's bodies, as a resource for someone other than herself.
Mm.
I had a good friend that I was talking to about this early on in my IFS journey. Many of you know that I came to IFS as a client or a patient, as I was transitioning out of the military after spending 18 and a half years in a very male dominant world, and being not all that aware of it because I was in the medical field in the Air Force. So seeing lots of nurses and women, and working in that setting, but not realizing just how disempowered we were around, our own autonomy, and especially our bodies, and how those bodies are criticized, especially if they are not the norm, they're not considered the norm, or they are not useful to the machine that it's supposed to serve. There's a lot of criticism that went with that I had to unpack. So I think first, having access to your body is a big thing, and it's a real privilege. We take that for granted if we have it. I think some people can kind of assume that all folks have it, and it's not something that you have if there's a history of your people being owned as property. Um, and so really having to dissect, like, what does this mean to own my own body and to be in the body and to experience my own body so that I can share me from a place of knowing me deeply.
Mm.
And especially, how do you unravel that from the church teachings and the things that I learned about my body as only, a source of enjoyment for a man.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
so yeah, it's been a very long journey.
So much there, Deran. Wow. And I'm almost wanting to slow down just for a moment, just to like resonate with all of that, the different pieces there. Yeah, maybe even inviting listeners to do that, that just noticing, what in that maybe even particularly landed, for you, or was new, or uh, seems obvious, based on your lived experience, right? So just so many pieces of that, the church piece, and both really appreciate you speaking to both the respect for religion and culture. I know you're a lover of travel and appreciating different cultures and all of the riches, that come with cultural diversity. And at the same time, the way that there can be these beliefs or messages implanted, particularly in a patriarchal culture or society, that can be um, hard to even notice when you're swimming in it, right? Like, I appreciated what you were saying, the military, like surrounded by women, it was almost hard to appreciate how much that patriarchal culture that created a different kind of, sense of relationship to your own body, was in that, and how that like reverberates perhaps, with religious upbringing, um, and there's so much right there. And then adding on slavery and the whole historical oppression of your body being not your own body. So
Yeah,
a
well,
whole
I
lot
think it's a
there.
good start. That having that body awareness
Mm.
is kind of where I started when I was transitioning out of the military, and this is definitely, like I said, the last sentence that I said before we slowed down was that this has been a very long journey for
Mhm.
me. So
Right.
I'm really comfortable with these parts, and
Mhm.
I guess as a collective, there are still many of us who are warming up to the idea of having conversations, real conversations around legacy burdens and racism and white supremacy culture and patriarchy and homophobia and transphobia and fatphobia. but I talk about these things on a regular basis. You know, I get
Mm-hmm.
paid to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And so it's also very important to me. Legacy is actually one of my core values. And so it feels important for me not to just talk about it, but to live it, you know, to truly live from a place of healing
Mm-hmm.
of these burdens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I always feel that with you, you know, the way that you talk and the way that you share is, you know, really coming through. I feel like your cells, you know. I've had the privilege, I should let people know, of like crossing paths and interacting with Deran in some really important moments in the course of my own, you know, journey of kind of stepping into the IFS community and, you know, teaching more about sexuality. So, you know, just, you know, reflecting on ways I've heard you share before in different settings, and know that that's true of you. Um,
Yeah, it's definitely been like an evolving process. And I think what's really helped me, I was just talking to Dick Shorts actually at a conference we both spoke at Oxford. And I said, I've been really working on the self-righteous part, you know, the part of me that when I came into the IFS community, I was newly established Black Therapist Rock as a nonprofit. And it was like, I'm coming here to teach white people what they need to know, you know, to honor our humanity. And number one, that's a huge burden for one person to carry. Number two, you don't get to actually exercise and be in your humanity when you think you have this role or this responsibility. Um, we all have a level of responsibility socially, and I get to be a human being and focus on myself. So I was just talking to Dick Shorts about that self-righteous part, and what really helped me realize and be with this part is that when I travel, I've been to over 40 plus countries now. You know, I've done work around IFS and teaching in China on legacy burdens, which was really eye-opening and profound. But when I'm able to take myself out of my own experience and my own norm and perspective and see somebody else's, like when you know, the time that I was in Africa or the time that I was in China or when I lived in Italy for 2 years, when I take myself out of everything that I know, I realize that there are certain resources and access to things that I have just as an American, as someone born in the United States of America. I call it passport privilege. You know, I had to be aware that even being able to book a flight and go to a whole different country comes with a tremendous amount of privilege. And so my responsibility in that, you know, to not carry shame around privilege, but to really honor the responsibility that can come with that, is that I can give voice to experiences that most people wouldn't even, you know about. And I can integrate them into my own. So just learning from these things, it's like I don't have to be sad or ashamed or feel guilty about the privilege that I have or that my life is different when I have maybe more access to resources and things like that, access to education, access to healthcare. Especially, I think what the way that I've also been able to really be curious about the self-righteous part is, you know, being more relational with my queer friends, you know, really wanting to understand their lived experiences and how we live. We may live in very similar environments, but their experiences are very different. When they engage in healthcare, it can be a very more vulnerable thing than as a
absolutely.
cis heterosexual Black woman. So intersectionality, you know, is made me curious about the parts of me that carry privilege and what I can do, you know, responsibly with those parts if I'm able to empower more people beyond just the folks that have the same access as I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very well stated and just really appreciate it. And I'm feeling my own level of privilege as you share that, which is on so many levels. And the privilege of launching a podcast, you know, this feels incredible, you know, but everything that it has taken and all the resources of therapy and education and access to technology and the capacity to hire help. And, you know, there's so many different aspects that go into this. And being able to be here with you and have this conversation. And, you know, that's not even beginning to address white skin privilege and body size privilege and, you know, hetero normative presentation and
Mm.
all those things that, have certainly eased my path to be here in this moment.
Yeah, and that can be a beautiful thing because it's all about what you do with it. I think
Right.
what you're doing here today with your platform
Hmm.
is going to be hopefully really powerful for
Hmm. Yeah. So maybe now's a good time to sort of bring it to the sexuality piece again, and kind of with all of that context, um, kind of this. I guess I have different words just floating around. It's not so linear right now, but the role of shame or subjugation, or how that lives in the body, and then how sexuality is impacted, both how is sexuality a coping, how can sexuality, at times be a coping strategy, how does sexuality maybe get exiled or like too constricted in like different ways. And um, I'm just wondering what resonates for
you.
you with that, or anything
Yeah.
else bubbling up for you.
Yeah, in terms of sex, I feel like the word shame always pops up, especially in hyper religious societies, which most are. There's a right and a wrong, there's, heaven and hell, there's all these polarizations around what we should be. And so for me, I should it on myself for many years around, oh, you should know, you should not have sex before marriage, but when you do get married, you should be an expert at it.
Mhm.
It's like how is that going to work? And so I tell people that for me, I define shame as it's an acronym: should have already mastered everything. And when I catch myself shoulding, like, oh, you, especially in terms of like the male gaze and wanting to people please men and serve them at the cost of myself, and the codependent parts of me that just want to give and give and give. Over since I turned 40, I'm 42. I feel like hormonally my body is changing. And she's like, no, we want to receive. It's time
Mhm.
to receive. So the parts of me that carry shame around receiving and, always feeling the need to serve and give, I think a lot of women might identify with that. And just the society says that that's our role, that's our purpose in life, is to always be serving men and children, and never really receiving anything for ourselves, not enjoying life and the juiciness of life for ourselves. So shame is definitely a topic that I talk a lot about, and I think in terms of sexuality, it's something that has to be explored. And it's individual for everyone. Like I said, the religiousness shows up in my experience. I did a little research yesterday to prepare for this talk, and I found out that 40%, over 40% of Black people attend a religious activity every week, and that same percentage is about, or the same information when it comes to white people, white body people, is only 26%. And so we like to think of, in my case, I used to be Christian. I identified as a Christian, and which is what most people of color actually identify strongly as, according to the research. And you think that in my mind growing up, I thought, oh, well, this religion, Jesus was white, quote unquote, because that's the image of what we see. And if Jesus was white, that means that most people who are looked like him would be also religious. So I thought it was just interesting to notice that, oh no, this is something that's been sold to marginalized people, but not necessarily practiced by the dominant group. Even though that's the rhetoric in politics, is, the church, separation between church and state, et cetera, et cetera. But are we really a nation built on the church, or is that mainly fed to people of color who are here?
Mm.
So just things like that, I think is so individual. If you're,
Right.
if depending on your denomination, or are you denominational, I've heard certain things about if you're Catholic versus if you're Jewish. I think it's shame, our sources of shame and the things that send us down the shame spiral can be really deeply personal,
Hmm.
and those are the things that get exiled, the things that are really true to us at our core. We cover that up to be able to fit in society and to survive.
Wow. Again, so much there. I almost want to like feel it like landing in me, the cultural layer, the multi-systemic lens here, right? Of not only the impact of religion, but even why are people of you know, Black people versus white people or people of different identities, maybe even kind of connected to particular religious ideologies or communities, so that's like a, larger system question, right? And then what lands in the body through that? Like, what are the teachings that come through that some are specific to specific to sexuality. There's could be really specific rules, and like you said, do this, don't do that, or do this, don't do this until this time, and then you have to know how to do it. um or like, don't do this, but you're going to do it anyway, so if you do it anyway, then you know don't tell anyone or feel bad, or like there's all sorts of things to navigate in religious environments or other cultural environments, I think, that have like a lot of um, kind of stated religious norms or rules. And then what happens, how does it land personally in our system if we have fallen outside of that or made choices that aren't in alignment with that? So there's like that whole piece. And then, of course, everyone's individual experience anyway, right? Like, we have personal relationships with people. We may be harmed sexually, or we may get a lot of confidence and empowerment through sexuality. But whatever it is, that's like kind of part of the personal story. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I can get really caught up in the legacy burdens and the collective stuff. And when I think about the personal story, so I'm like, why was I so afraid of sex? What I'm like unraveling, like I said, every day of my life. And I realized that it was also the story of my mom was a teen mother. My grandmother had actually paid for her to have an abortion. And, because my mother, she was someone who everyone thought had a really bright future. She was super smart in school, and now she's pregnant. Um, and it significantly changed her life, of course, becoming a mom at 16 and having 3 children by the time you're 19 is definitely, in this country, a pathway for poverty for a lot of women. And so we struggle with a lot of homelessness and hunger. And when I used to tell that story from a place of shame, it was like I didn't even feel like I deserved to exist. And I think there might be a lot of personal experiences around feeling ashamed to exist because maybe your mother, her struggle was so difficult. Um, a lot of us is what I'm finding. And because I was able to do a lot of healing work around that, I now realize that I am her legacy gift. I'm like one of the best things that could have happened to her, just as my child is one of the best things that happened for me. Um, so I think there's a lot of work for just our personal stories as well, how we integrate that into healing instead of pain.
Feeling a lot of impact of you just telling that piece, that transformation. um feel a tingly thing going on, in my body. My eyes are tearing up a little bit, just really feeling, and um knowing I'm not knowing, even like the incredible amount of healing and um the maturing process, like all of the things that go into having that shift from I'm ashamed to exist, which is, as a little one, we take on those feelings, right? Like it may be stated, it may not be stated, but it's felt, right? Like ashamed to exist to now, like, I'm the legacy gift. That's amazing.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah.
Another resource that I love to share whenever I'm talking with folks is the 12-step model. After IFS, I found adult children of dysfunctional families really helpful in terms of looking at my personal story, looking at the legacy burdens and how it all shows up in me today. They have a big piece around shame. I can actually share it with you. It's a document now that they've been creating to really help folks around the parts of us that carry shame.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing, because that's another thing I was wondering, like what are all the tools that I've used on this journey? And I would say 12 steps has been a tool to normalize some of the pain that I used to be ashamed of, to hear other people say things similar to what I'm feeling, um, has really helped me be seen in a different way, in a more autonomous way. It's like we don't know each other, especially if you're online. There's like hourly meetings now via Zoom and phone systems and whatnot. So you may not even be able to see the person, but you feel it, like you said, that attunement, and you feel as if someone understands and gets it. That's really corrective. It's a corrective experience that can really settle in your bones, in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are amazing resources, and we can share more about that in the notes for the program for this conversation too. Um, and I'm kind of, one of the things that I've gotten very curious about is which parts of ourselves show up, maybe before, during, and after sexual connection. Where self energy, where are our parts, and this earlier you were also talking about receiving, and I find there's really different parts show up for people related to giving sexually, and receiving attention sexually, and that can be very different, even receiving different kinds of attention. People might be really comfortable maybe with receiving, you know I don't know, just, receiving, um, uh, kind of another person through sexual intercourse, but maybe not comfortable with receiving oral sex, like almost like different self consciousness or a different relationship with the part of the body, or a different, like different parts can show up in so many different ways. Um, but this, if someone's very blended, say with a very young part that's ashamed to exist, how powerful a burden is that? And then, just wondering, how does that impact, a given sexual experience? If I'm ashamed to exist, where am I? Or what parts
Yeah.
of me have to do this, have to do so that the part of me that's ashamed to exist, isn't, maybe outed, or um, ashamed, shamed further. For a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, what is ostensibly an enjoyable activity becomes like a terrifying experience of trying to not be humiliated, trying to get through an experience without, just adding to the shame.
Yeah. As I hear you say that, it really makes me think about touch. So many people, before you can talk about sex, it's like we have to talk about touch. And touch deprivation is a real thing, especially amongst the younger generation, such as myself, the millennials, and beyond. My son's generation, I think they are going to maybe have even more difficulties with this. But there's some research that says we need 12 hugs a day as children for our brains to fully develop in a very healthy way. And I think there's also some sensitivity when we're not receiving those hugs and that touch. Your skin is, it's almost craving it. And so to feel ashamed of something that your body is physically craving and needing, that was one thing for me, because I knew my mother, she couldn't give it. She wasn't available to give it. And so some of the needs that we have as children, we learn to exile those and put them away, or tell we have a protector that says you don't need that. So I very much had a protector that said you don't need to be touched. And I find it ironic. I meet men, I'm dating often, and I meet men who are more comfortable doing everything sexually, but feel more vulnerable when they kiss or when they hold hands. Um, so even in the psychedelic world, there's a lot of therapy techniques around hand holding. And I realize when I have someone holding my hand of the opposite gender, because of social constructs, that it feels different. It feels, and I had to get really curious about what that is, or just holding hands in general can feel
Mm-hmm.
very. for a lot of us, maybe we haven't done it a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
no, I want to hear what you have to say too. But this whole idea of like intimacy,
Mhm.
to really be seen and be held by someone, it starts way before, there's intercourse or there's sex involved. And I think that process is a lot more emotional than we want to actually, you know, admit. We don't want to admit that we have these emotional needs and these sensations that go with an emotional need. Um, and so that is something that I think a lot of people just kind of push away. And a lot of sex, from what I'm seeing in the world right now, a lot of the younger generations, it's like sex for excitement, just to feel some intensity of something. Also the the dopamine rush of, I've accomplished something. It's not necessarily oxytocin of wanting to connect or wanting to be with someone, but more so like using someone for an outcome.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I'm very aware of that in the dating world.
Yeah, again, so much there. The touch history, I'm really resonating with that. I just finished a week of assisting Susan McConnell at a somatic IFS retreat, and she's a fantastic senior lead trainer in the IFS community who really has developed ways to help people to kind of embody their own energy, their own self energy. And she was talking about that we all have touch histories. And she said it kind of boils down to not getting the touch we needed or getting too much touch that was misattuned or even abusive, and
Mhm.
one of her 5 practices is what she calls attuned touch, which is not either of those. But how many people, again, it's a privilege if we want to look at it that way, in life, to have experienced, for the majority at least, attuned touch within close relationships.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and then appreciating all these other things like, you know, being a teen mom or not having received that yourself, or being so overwhelmed, or having a hateful relationship with your own body. There's so many things that can get in between being able to offer attuned touch that isn't too much or too little to a child, and that's that generational piece again, right? Because then you have um, what you were saying also, which is, people get to an age of, adolescence or, adulthood. And there's this, I find it's sometimes it's a real surprise, or like I call it like a sneaker for people, like that, oh, I just want to have sex, or I just want to hook up. And then like these really powerful longings can show up, and our young parts can form attachments and not know what to do with the level of hunger, that's there. And then, yeah, so I could go on, but I'm just resonating with what you're naming. And
Yeah, and it also kind of goes back to Erickson's social psychological development model, where he talks about in the first year, and I think this is so fascinating. I could like read about this forever. But the first year of life, we're really learning how to trust. And if we aren't able to develop trust with our caregiver, with the world, and ultimately with ourselves, feeling okay in this existence, if we're not able to develop that trust within the first year, what you see is in the 35, I think 35 to 45 range is when ideally we are, or I think it's 25 maybe 25 to 45. Ideally, we decided to develop some career for ourselves, and now we're looking for a partner, someone to do life with, someone to support us on this journey, and to have mutual connection and intimacy, and that to the things that we need to thrive as human beings, because we're wired for connection. And the touch, the ongoing consistent touch that many people in my generation do not have. What we have in exchange is actually chronic loneliness, feeling very, isolated, very alone most of the time, is what I'm seeing. And so when we aren't able to form trust in the world early on and trust in ourselves, really, that I can be okay and I can make, someone will be there to support me and I can rely on that. That shows up in our relationships. And when you talk about touch history or attuned touch, it's like, yeah, if you don't trust this person at all, and you're fearful of this person, or a part of you is afraid of this person because of their gender or because of some power dynamic that we also don't talk about that shows up in sexual relationships. Um, I think it's just something to be curious about for all of us. And so I've been really curious about the parts of me that struggle with trust, the parts of me that want to give up my power versus sharing power. Because I was that women don't deserve power. They don't have power, especially as a Black woman or a Spanish woman, which I saw many growing up in Texas. It's like they were powerless. So if that's your framework that you're bringing to relationships from very early on, it's some those parts of us, like you said, that are connecting with someone in what way, and what are they seeking really? The part of me that loves to cuddle, is she? And I also parenting my own son, what I've seen is, yeah, he loves to cuddle, but he needs it less and less each year. There's a natural growth progression, whereas he's detaching from me slowly, thankfully. And one day I know that he will be able to attach to a partner because he's had all these experiences of attuned touch. So yeah, just seeing that natural, like what is natural progression where it's not too much, it's not overly done, it's not invasive. It's really an invitation, and he can take it whenever he needs it now. Because when he's 13 or 16 or 17, maybe he doesn't want to do that so much with his mother. But the fact that he has it in him, that he has a body memory actually of being attuned in that way.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing in that parenting piece. And again, that intergenerational piece that we're, if those of us, and being a parent who wants to be a parent is a privilege as well, right? To want, a child to be able to have a child. And, that when, we talk about the good, like Winnicott talks about, we need a good enough parent, right? We don't need a perfect parent. We need good enough, and how that allows, the natural development to happen. Which at times is more pulling away, and at times, coming back to home base or leaning in or exploring relationships. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just noticed, like, for, a lot of people, especially people of color, are very uncomfortable with touch. And I'll say more so specifically Black people, especially in the United States of America, where individualism is really the prized possession. It's like if you can do everything on your own, that is the pathway to success. So needing touch, is not consistent with that rugged individualism that a lot of us have been sold on. And for me, I'll be very transparent and honest. It wasn't until I got trained in MDMA therapy that I invited touch really in this healing way back into my life. Because I didn't know what I was missing. And if I can get it with my child, I get lots of hugs from him, or when I want one, I can ask him for one and invite him into one. And I hadn't really known what I was missing, if you will, because it's become so normalized for us to want to do everything on our own or be able to do everything for ourselves. That self-reliance was a part of me that got me through a lot of things. It got me through college, got me through the military and college at the same time, got me through deployments. It gets me through some of the hard leadership things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis. However, it's not a great part when I'm wanting to connect deeply with another human.
So, yeah, I'm hearing in that these different strategies, like different parts can have around how to feel safe. And I don't know if you're remembering the 6 S's. I've come up with these 6 S's of sexual self energy, and they kind of can flow as a sequence, but the first one is safe, this idea that our own self energy is safe. I feel like it's safe to be ourselves, like to feel our own aliveness, to feel our own warmth inside. And that doesn't mean the outside world is safe or welcoming, or that in every situation we have that privilege to be able to turn toward our own lived inner experience, but in a safe enough context that it's safe to be us, to be in our own skin. And then sensuality is something we already have, like these qualities that we already have inside, of safety and sensuality and spaciousness and sensitivity and steaminess and satisfaction.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, yeah, way I'm curious. I have a curious part. I noticed, how that landed hearing those. And then also I was sort of just wanting to appreciate those dilemmas that the parts have of like, is it safe to be touched? Am I safer being held by someone? If I can I trust that to be cuddled and held and let myself receive? Or is it safer for me to not need anything or let anyone really touch me physically or emotionally, because the risk of harm or
Yeah.
discomfort is so great?
I think it depends, as a single 40s Black woman, I think it really just depends on the situation. And I love what you said about feeling safe in our own self energy, because no matter what the situation is, I can come back to myself, and return back to a place of wholeness and okayness. Um, I actually, as we're talking, I have a dog napping next to me, my therapy dog, who I'm like really just cuddling him and rubbing him. And I'm realizing he's asleep. So it's not for him. It's more so for me, So receiving touch for myself for just pleasure's sake, for just my own satisfaction, was what kind of made me say, that I'm able to
Mm-hmm.
give myself things that are just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a lot of work to get to a place like that. I had parts of me that never wanted a dog, actually, because I was afraid of what it would be like to lose them. So needing anything or anyone, that self-reliant part, she didn't want it. And as I said, becoming an MDMA trained therapist and having my own healing experiences with MDMA therapy is what transformed that relationship that I had with needing in the first session, actually, that I had. It was documented for a documentary, an IFS documentary, with an IFS trained therapist who guided me through the session. And what I noticed and found very quickly was the exile who had burdens around needs. And she didn't even want my son to need me. So that was an interesting thing that wasn't in my awareness. Like, how has my parenting been influenced suddenly, or subtly, should I say, through this part or because of this part? And instead of feeling guilty about it, it's like I came home and cuddled with my kid for 3 days straight almost, to really realize that it's okay to allow him to have these needs and to embrace those and honor those, which has been a journey for me to do the same for myself. So that self-reliant part, I will say probably about the last 4 years, has really been evolving and changing, to a place where it's situational. There are some men where I feel like I need to be leery and mindful, that touch can often be used as manipulation, for someone else's own satisfaction and gain. But being able to slow things down and be present in my body and be present in the moment, and fully aware of what I'm feeling, is what's going to help me through that process. I don't know what part of your community tends to be therapists or just regular people who are interested in healing. I also don't know if you're largely a married crowd or if you have lots of single girls and boys.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm
Yeah.
hoping there's something here for all of those folks. In between.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
in terms of this work, I feel very fortunate that a really diverse group of people has been coming into the IFS community, and then really resonating a lot with this work around sexuality. And I feel like the topic of sexuality tends to get exiled in lots of different therapeutic communities and spaces. And I think what I was wanting to bring in is that I feel it's so important to open these conversations about sexuality within our own systems, even amongst our parts, in professional communities, people who are here to help others, to feel more connection and aliveness and fulfillment in their lives. That to me, to include sexuality in the conversation feels essential. And it's something so many of us have those either by neglect, just it not being included in our training or in our culture, kind of common discourse. Or maybe it's only brought up in a way that feels very yucky or objectifying or superficial. Um, just to, have boundaries, but to be able to um, kind of just be inclusive of these parts of our bodies and parts of our personal lives when we're involved in kind of these deep growth oriented experiences.
When I'm in Europe, it's so different.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in Amsterdam or the UK, it's like sex is not as taboo,
Mm-hmm.
which I find very interesting. It's like, how did that happen? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a stepchild of the United Kingdom, so why don't we have that? But I think also about the fact that America was created on this idea of religious freedom, right? So people came here thinking, oh, can practice my faith in a different way, that'll be respected by the government. And so maybe that's why I don't know the full, I don't have a full understanding of like how to unpack that. But I see even in Africa, sex is definitely, it's like it's talked about on the radio late at night. It's kind of swept away to a corner of, if you're interested, you have to seek it and find it, versus
Mm-hmm.
be out in the public. I think we're getting better as a society in America. When I get uh you know notices sent home from school in kindergarten that says they're going to have a conversation about consent and boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain pockets of our very progressive nature, our very progressive country and our nation, where people are trying to be more forward thinking
Mm-hmm.
around these things. But
Yeah.
I don't know, progress,
Mm-hmm.
not perfection. It's like the fact that we're
Yeah.
having a conversation is really
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. So I'm wondering like if there's anything um I feel like, I always kind of want to go big with the big picture and then sometimes kind of bring it back to the sort of smaller kind of day-to-day
Mm.
kinds of things, like today it's Friday as we're recording this on a Friday. And just feeling into what's um, in my skin or what's in my body today. Are there parts here right now? And maybe people listening would want to check in, or maybe you'd want to check in and just see is there any part here right now or any somatic push or pull um, around even the coming, the next day or a couple of days? Like, is there something that wants attention or might feel good, or this discussion of touch, even if it's self-touch, is there, some part that would like, some special connection or care?
Yeah. I feel like this whole conversation around my self-reliant part, which was a protector, has made space for me to acknowledge the part of me that's a little tired of sleeping alone, the one who was single for all those years to get all those things done and then got married and knows what it's like to sleep next to someone and have that physical support. And I guess because my dog is here sleeping and I'm like giving him a little paw massage. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, this is why I continue dating, because this is kind of the thing that I miss about marriage and about partnership or being in an actual committed relationship. And so I think there's a lot of great things about being single. I have so many parts of me that love being single, the freedom and I think more the self-reliant stuff, it's like, oh, you don't have to be accountable to anybody, except for yourself. And part of being accountable to myself is just to be honest about my need for touch. So I think there is a part of me that's more willing to be seen now, around just feeling a little sadness that we're not getting the touch, as much touch as we need or want.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and welcome that part. And appreciate the vulnerability of speaking for that. And I don't know if you want to do a little piece with that part. That's beyond where you want to go.
No, I was just thinking, like, when you asked the question, it was like an invitation to bring a part out that might be ready to do some work. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just checking in, just with your protectors, with your, system, just to check more, even a little more deeply that there's a yes in there. And that's something, I always encourage that internal consent, process to go a little more vulnerable. Let's see if your parts are on board.
Yeah, it feels okay.
Yeah. Do you want to just see what you're noticing now?
Yeah, this part is it's noticing, like, how my dog is just so soothed by touch. So like I'm touching him now. And how my son, like, he almost refuses to go to bed without the dog. So this part is like, I was like, how old are you? Um, and she's like, well, we're younger than that, because, Amir, he loves to sleep with the dog. And the idea of the dog being in my bed is just like, no, it's too intimate for non-human relation for me. Yeah, there's a part that's like, no, we don't want to do that.
So there's a part who's noticing your son and his kind of receiving of something with the dog, and parts of you that are saying, no, we don't want that with the dog.
Because the dog will jump on his bed and like put his head on my kid's leg. The sweetest thing, like, they love each other so much, and they're just connected in that way. But she's like, yeah, no, we don't want that. She was very clear.
So is there a sense of a part here you're in touch with right now?
And yeah, I'm just trying to like backtrack and see how old she is. How far back. That's what it is. She misses still. Wow. I hadn't thought about this in years. She misses sleeping with her sisters because for many, many years, we only had one bed and there were three girls. So we always slept together in the bed.
Yeah. How is that to hear that from her?
It feels important. There's a part of me that came on board in basic training that told her, like, we have to put that away. That's not important now. Like, the more my accomplished parts, or the parts that were focused on financial success, which is like, no, you need to that's a childhood thing, put that away. So like just acknowledging her still again now, and wanting to build a relationship with her and get to know her more and hear her more feels really important.
Can she sense you there?
Not yet. No.
Yeah.
Because it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Like, looked her way. It's true. Yeah. The protector was blocking.
And how do you feel toward her?
I think she carries a lot of shame for that, like for having that need. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. I felt like I was wrong for wanting that and needing that. And I'm telling her, no, it's completely natural, to want that, need that.
Yeah. And does she seem to notice you there? to hear
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Mm.
She thought I didn't want her. Like I didn't like her or wanted to kind of, that's what she thought. That she wasn't necessary or important.
Mm. So maybe, yeah, just letting her feel you now in a different way. Maybe just seeing if she's able to take that in.
So it's going to take some time.
Mhm. Sure. Hmm.
It really just got the trust thing too. She's like, I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't know if I did.
Hmm.
Yeah. She's
Mm.
trust feels like a stranger almost.
Like you seem like a stranger to her.
Mm.
Yeah. Would you want to ask her if you could look out her eyes at yourself and see what she sees?
Yeah, it's like she doesn't know me. She's like shocked. It's like that's you,
Mm.
like kind of frozen in time and she's not aware of what I've been up to since that time.
Yeah. And does it seem like she's kind of stuck somewhere or
Yeah, I was just thinking like, where are you? She's still in the dorms and basic training. Like,
oh.
man, she can still, like I used to cry myself to sleep first couple of days. I think a lot of girls did
Mhm.
secretly. Um, but yes, like she's still in that little room in that bed.
And the one who loves sleeping with her sisters, is that another one? Another part? Or is
No, just
that
like that part with me to basic training, but just kind of left her there.
hmm.
I very much went to basic training with her. I don't get
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sensing her there now and her feeling you now, just kind of seeing, does she want to know more about you now or
Yeah, she's definitely interested. And she's like, I would be willing to go with you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bring her out of there?
Yeah. It's not a good place
Hmm.
to be.
Hmm.
Especially,
Yeah. Do you feel ready for that? Do you want to
yeah,
bring her somewhere safe and comfortable? Maybe your present home or somewhere else?
yeah, she likes my house.
Mm.
She's looking around to see where exactly. Like, well, take your time.
Mm. Yeah, let her know she can be really comfortable here.
Comfy is kind of her thing. She's like, I like to be comfy.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And do you notice about how far away from you she is?
She's just like walking around the house, really.
Mm.
Just
Hmm.
not all that interested in me yet.
Hmm. Yeah.
Checking it all out. Like
Uh-huh.
this setting seems better than the one we left.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Different, than
Mm.
a dorm room with basic training.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that might be the part also that likes to stay up late, like being with other people. Because that's what she did in basic training. Some of us would stay up later than others. I, I mean, late is hard when it's 4 o'clock wake up, but
Mm.
yeah, she used to just like to stay up late and
Yeah.
talk.
Hmm. Do you want to ask her about that?
Yeah,
What was good for her about that?
it's like connection. Like you want to get as much of it as you can.
Would you want to see if there's anything she's carrying that she took in from basic training that she wants to unload?
Yeah, I mean, just being in my house, she feels like this idea that you have to sleep alone to be successful. It's like maybe that's not true since, you're successful and there's been times where you didn't sleep alone. So she's ready to give that up. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
That's true anymore.
Mm. Do you want to help her with that? Maybe giving that up to an element, fire, water, air, earth, or some other way.
She's torn between fire or water.
You
So we'll have to.
could do both.
Ooh, she likes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's excited about like, oh, fire and water. Very excited.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very excited.
Yeah. So maybe she has she already started to release that, or does she need any more help?
No, she's like, yeah, ready to let it go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, just let it go.
Mm-hmm. And how does she seem now?
More relaxed, like more just carefree and playful.
Mm-hmm. And does she want to call in anything, different for herself, or maybe even just like feel her own energy expand a little more inside?
Mm-hmm. 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 It's like more expansion and openness around like both and like fire and ice,
Hmm.
fire and water. Like, it doesn't have to be this or that, like so success or sex. Like, yeah, we have both. Like just
You-
integrate both and
mm,
hmm
yeah.
he
Huh.
wants to play with
Wants to play with both.
hmm
Yeah. And how does she seem in relationship to you now?
She's really close. She's like sitting basically right next to me,
Uh-huh. Huh.
telling me all these things that she wants to explore.
Uh-huh.
hmm
Huh. And how is that for you to have her close and telling you all these things?
It's good because I'm like really interested.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting, to get
Mm-hmm.
to know her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
And maybe thanking her, or whatever way feels nice for you to bring a bit of closure to that. Anything else happening with this that you want to speak for?
I was just letting her know, like, to be continued.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Like a better words. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so
Ready,
sleepy.
ready to now you feel sleepy, ready to take a cozy nap, huh? Yeah, I really appreciate your willingness to share your part here. It's really that's a privilege for sure. To be able to be with you and this part of you. It's an intimate space we go to.
Mhm.
Sharing this with another person. I feel that. Wondering how you're feeling as you kind of come back from that.
I'm feeling okay. I feel like I know you, it's
Mm-hmm.
over the years. I know that I've developed a lot of trust with you and like consistency and reliability, I think. That's been great to experience. Um, yeah. I feel really good. I'm feeling grateful to be able to have this, opportunity for just another piece of healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's such a gift to our listeners to really be in the process together with you. And I think it's such an amazing example of how we may notice something on the, out here, like, and it's a lot to notice that. Like there's it could be quite a bit just to acknowledge, like you said, even like the desire for more closeness, physical closeness, and then following that just that desire and moving in kind of just with your self-awareness took you, to this part of yourself. And I'm seeing you visually, but listeners won't, but I could kind of see like a recognition, like, oh, like you found this part, like there's, you kind of went into this place where you have these relationships, right? With this and a relationship with this part, and then we're able to like bring it forward and, do what you did here today. It's a really great living example, of how, this path to becoming self-led in bed is,
Mhm.
unpredictable and circuitous, and, can take us to places known and unknown, on the journey.
Mhm. Hmm.
Yeah. So, is there anything you'd like to share with people who might want to learn more about you or your work? We'll put in the show notes some resources that you've provided, but in your own voice, just do you want to share anything about what you're excited about now and how people can
Yeah,
connect with you?
one of the biggest things that's kind of on my radar that I'm super excited about right now is that I'll be doing a 6-city tour next year on the topic of shame and addiction. And so we're kind of ramping up for that, and it feels really exciting. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for healing to happen, for healing in community, really, to have hard conversations around love addiction, or maybe for some people it might be porn addiction, or maybe codependency, just feeling desperately in need of people all the time because of our attachment traumas. And so I'm excited about that. But if folks are wanting to learn more about me from the internet, I would recommend Black Therapist Rock on Instagram, Deran Young, LCSW on Facebook, or our website, blacktherapistrock.com.
Terrific. Well, thank you again so much, Deran. And I'm so, just so warmed by this opportunity to connect with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast. Check us out at www.patriciarich.com/podcast, where you can sign up for a free guide to the 6 S's of sexual self-energy. Until next time.